Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here again for another webinar in our series Between Two Hats. And this time, it's a topic that is very dear to my heart. We're going to be discussing the ROI of social features and moderation. How do we connect community work with the actual business and the reasons, the good reasons for doing it? So my name is Carlos Figueiredo, and I'm the Director of Community Trust and Safety here for Two Hat. I have been here for 4 years now, and a lot of my focus is working with our clients and partners to see how we can streamline their moderation practices, how we can apply best practices that at the end of the day will lead to more efficiency in their process. So I think this is a really key topic that relates to my role a lot. And I'm so excited to be talking to our guest today, Steve Parkis, who is a senior tech and entertainment exec with a really amazing wealth of knowledge. And I will let Steve introduce himself. Thank you so much for being here today, Steve.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Carlos. It's an exciting topic. And yeah, I've been doing this for a while. So about 20 years ago, I got my start here in Orlando at Walt Disney World, building theme parks. Little did I know, a year later, they'd move me to Los Angeles, where I'd start working on the internet in the 1900s. That's how long I've been doing this. And I ended up at Disney as a senior exec running their online games team, growing it from 8 people to several hundred. Then I moved on to Zynga, where I started there in 2010 when it was just pretty much Farmville, and moved and ended up running all the Ville businesses. So Farmville, Cityville, and several other businesses, and then continued my career in Silicon Valley. Working at a mobile startup, and then running helping run an augmented reality company. And throughout all of that, for about the last 15 years, I've been working both with very large, in the case of Farmville, 20 million people a day, communities, and also tech and moderation. And during my time at Disney, obviously, keeping kids safe was of the utmost importance. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the background. Given that you have led very large teams through successful growth in key titles in those companies, would you be able to share an example of how important community was for the growth of those games and social features as well?
Sure. Let's take Cityville as an example. So at the core of Cityville, you have a very simple idea. I'm going to start my new community, and I'm going to build the world's best city. And we wanted to empower you to do that through putting the Eiffel Tower in, a college football stadium, whatever for you meant this is going to be a thriving city, and I'm the best mayor in the world. Our retention on that game was extremely high. We were getting 40+% day one retention, and everything was going great. Then we added social features. So then we added the ability to connect more closely with friends. And what the results that we saw in terms of retention were unlike anything else we had put in the game. Once you have a very solid core loop in your game, there's almost nothing more powerful you can do than connect your players to each other. Because once they develop those social bonds and they become a community, they begin to take ownership of the game. If you look at a game like Club Penguin, you came for the Pizzatron 3000. Like, you wanted to make as many pizzas as possible, but really what drove you week to week to retain over a long period of time were the parties, and knowing that you were going to be able to see the other penguins and interact with them. And so that, to me, that sticky element of, but it's not just a game, these are my friends. There's nothing more powerful than that.
Absolutely. I love the Club Penguin example. At my time there, in both the Brazilian community, the English-speaking community, I saw that day in, day out, right? How people were part of a tribe. So kids would come back to see their friends, and because they belonged, they wanted to share those experiences. The game had so many layers now, so many social layers. And it's interesting that in one of the studies that we did here at Two Hat, we actually found that not most, but actually all the users who engaged in chat on day one, they were 3 times more likely to return on day 2 than somebody who never engaged in chat. So I think it's hardly possible to ignore that stat, right?
I think that's right. And most people, typically you're going to come at this from a safety or a protection point of view. But when you start talking about running a business, you really want to think about what's the return in terms of a very optimistic point of view. And what you see is like, I was in the Disney theme parks the other day. I still go back quite often. And I've been in the Disney theme parks by myself. I've ridden on Splash Mountain when it was just, they also didn't have the sound on, so it was a little weird. But I was on Splash Mountain by myself, and it just wasn't as fun as having all the other people around you. And so, you know, if you only think about these features as they are here to protect, you kind of forget that, no, it's a part of the experience, and it makes the experience better. And that's really why people come, is it's one thing to do things by yourself. But if you've ever wandered down one of these major streets and seen a breakdance group, right? Nothing draws a crowd like a crowd. Once you have 5 or 10 people standing in a circle watching something on a sidewalk, there are going to be 10 to 20 more, because that's human nature. And so if you can get these communities started and rolling, you know, it can help with your acquisition, it can help with your retention. It really becomes a very powerful tool to help drive the growth of your piece of entertainment or any other app for that matter.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that concept as well of your very own players start driving that engagement, right? They start driving that growth and connecting with each other. And I think this is a really good segue in terms of the next piece we'll be discussing today, Steve, because I think the first piece is well established, that we understand that social features in games make such a huge difference, right? In your experience with the big titles you worked on, in our experience here at Two Hat as well, a lot of our clients, they are very focused on social, and they see a lot of the growth through that, right? For example, one of our clients has the ability for folks to talk in the general chat areas, but also talk in the group chat areas. And what they observe is an amazing engagement when people form those groups, when people form those tribes. So I think we have that well established that it pays to have social features in the game. However, of course, this being a very dear side to my work when we talk about community trust and safety, we understand that it's not all fun and games when it comes to interactions online, and there are challenges, right? There are challenges in terms of disruptive behavior or negative antisocial behavior, what we call a lot nowadays. So in this case, I have this this thought that I wanted to discuss with you today, which is, I believe that we have been looking at this issue perhaps not with the best perspective in the past. We have been looking at, oh, we need to do something about this and just focusing on the negative. When actually, I think we consider the disruptive and the negative behavior, we should look at it as something we need to tackle. Yes, absolutely. Because it is a blocker to better user engagement, to better user experience. It is a blocker to fulfilling the real potential of this game or of this platform. So I see it more on that side now, because when we take care of the disruption, then we can see the other side flourish. Because in our experience here, most chat at any given point in a game or platform, and I'm talking 80% or more, is very innocuous. So it's people actually talking about the game, people talking about their day, having fun, talking about their friendship and so forth. So in your experience, what have you seen in this area, and what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of a problem we had in the Disney theme parks, right? You know, from a business point of view, that people standing in queue lines is not good for the business. Like, you just watch people stand there for 45 minutes at a time, and you just know that you don't want them to have that experience. And so you start with, well, let's get them out of the lines because we kind of know it would feel better. But then what part of my job, one thing I proved was that it was also actually better overall, not just for the experience, not just for the guests' intent to return to Walt Disney World, but also it gave people more time to do other things. They would shop more, they would eat more, and all of that drove up their guest satisfaction score on how enjoyable was my Disney World experience, which again led to retention. Well, the same thing goes in these worlds. You know, when I look at the kind of information you can get out of a platform like Two Hat and Community Sift, it's not just the negative that you can wipe away, but what does the cohort of your most retained users look like? What are they talking about? And how do you take that message and how do you amplify that message to all the people who didn't get it? And what happens to your overall retention when you take those very positively focused messages and you start amplifying those in the broader community? That to me is the yes, we have to deal with the cynical side, but that's the optimistic view of the exact same data set. And that to me becomes very exciting.
Absolutely. I also like very much something that we have discussed in the past, Steve, when you said how many opportunities do you have to do something that is both intrinsically good, it's good, but it's also good for business, right?
That's exactly right. Like as a product manager myself, you're always looking for that. How do I take and increase the results for my business, but also do good for the community? It's interesting, when I was at Zynga, the company was not always known as being the best customer service organization. And when I got there, coming from Disney, one of the first things I did was move community to the front. Why? Because when you do that and you place the onus there, that's when you get the real learnings. And it's the ability then to go to the business people as I did. So, when I got to Zynga, you'd always put a new revenue feature. That kind of always got prioritized on the stack rank of things let's go do. But when I got to Zynga, I ran a game called Cafe World. And, the number one thing that people talked about was the frame rate, that the game wasn't playable. And I put then frame rate number one on the stack rank of things we're going to go do. And in a lot of ways, it was a lot like putting moderation number one on the things to go do for a game. The average GM is going to look at that and be like, well, why would I, there's all these other game related things that I could do. Well, when we fixed the frame rate, every other metric went up. And now we could hear more about what are those underlying things we can do in the game because we had taken care of that very base level. And to me, feeling safe in a game and having positive conversations and interactions in today's security environment is incredibly important and kind of table stakes for being able to have a healthy game that then's going to allow you to figure out what are the other things I can go do to grow this business.
Yes, in terms of that feeling of safety and knowing that you are stepping into a healthy community, how important is that for a new user, in your opinion?
Oh, incredible. So my son is a very competitive soccer player. He goes to a gym here in Orlando. He's rehabbing from an ACL reconstruction, and it's very serious athletes. He's in the same gym with like Carly Lloyd and some of the very some professional soccer players. And the gentleman who runs the gym wants me to work out there. But the one thing I know as I walk into that gym is that I am not going to work out there because I need to go work out before I could work out in the gym. So that sense of belonging, that sense of immediate, like this is where I should be, even in an online community, if you can relate that to your first experience in a gym, it's extremely important. Because that day one retention and that, you never get, I guess the saying would be you never get a second chance to make a first impression. That very first impression of what do I hear right when I walk in the door, you never get a chance to reset that. And in terms of your retention, in terms of getting people into the story, into the experience, there's nothing more important than that.
Excellent. So something that has been on my mind quite a lot this quarter is this topic overall. I'm focusing on collaborating with a lot of folks in terms of creating a really solid white paper that will show this connection more explicitly. And when I say it, it is the connection between community work and moderation and social features with the ROI, the growth and retention of players. So one thing that has been in my mind right now is this whole idea of, I think the community teams and the moderation teams have been seen as a cost center. And we're probably still seen as cost center, for a lot of places. But I think that's also a misguided perspective because we are looking at just one aspect of it, right? We're looking at removing those blockers, but for what? Why? Why is it important to remove those blockers? So I really hope that with the conversations that we'll continue to have and the new resources and numbers and metrics, will be able to show that community teams, people who are responsible for that increased user engagement, they actually are driving growth and retention in their communities.
At Roblox, Clash, Fortnite, those games don't, they don't get to the top and then drop. They get to the top and they sustain. And why is that? That's because, yes, the games are awesome. The creativity, like in a Roblox, is incredible. But also, once you have a community that you belong to, once you have established a cohort of friends that are experiencing something with you and it's a shared experience, now there's a social bond, and that's extremely strong. The relationship with a piece of content may come or go, but the relationship with other human beings and that feeling of these people count on me, and this is something that I'm adding to and that I have ownership of. And I think that's what really happens is you start to turn over the ownership of a game from the creators to the community. That's when you really get these very long-term, very sustained pieces of content, entertainment, and other applications.
Absolutely. Just to give a shout out to a company that I know they do this very well is Rovio. They do this amazingly well with their games, their Angry Bird games. I know that they reward the community for various reasons, and one of those reasons is for providing ideas that end up making the game design. And I think this is a brilliant way to engage the community for sure.
Yeah, it was great. We did the same thing with Cityville. We named buildings after players and had them all the time. There was nothing more magical than you get an idea in the afternoon, and by that night we had it in the game, and it was ready to go all the way through to and I'll just throw this out as something that was incredibly important to long-term community health, both that I saw with Club Penguin and at Zynga was giving back. So we had a very big program of, a tsunami. I remember very vividly a tsunami hit. I think it was Indonesia while I was running Cityville. We put up in that afternoon a fundraiser for the tsunami. And by the time, the next day came around, we'd raised in the millions of dollars for tsunami relief. Not only was that great from a humanitarian point of view, you really feel good when you're able to provide that kind of an impact to the world. But also, I will tell you that retention of those players, when they had this feeling of I'm not only playing something, but I'm able to do good in the world, retention was enhanced through that activity.
It's so great that you're saying this because last year I presented one of our first webinars was the 6 essential pillars to a healthy online community. And one of the points that I had there was the amazing work that Club Penguin did with Coins for Change, which was also a way for the kids to decide where $1 million would go in the world to create social good. But also the work that Roblox did last year after Hurricane Harvey. They had in-game items that kids could purchase, and all the proceedings from those that went straight to the relief for the hurricane. So I had exactly that point that when you are engaging, doing something good together, you really have a lot of space for negative behavior and for not growing that community, right?
Yeah, and without violating any data that I may or may not have come across during my time at Zynga, you're talking about hundreds of basis points improvement in retention from the people who are able to engage in that kind of an activity. So it's a non-trivial way to, again, do good in the world and do good for your game.
Excellent. And that's a good example of you remove the blocker of negative behavior. And when I'm saying negative behavior, I'm talking, of course, of harassment, of hate speech, and all those things. If we remove this blocker, now we're able to do so many other things in the game, right? We're able to add other features, like you said here, what most players are talking about, and facilitate the creation of those experiences that they actually want to have, right? Another example here is what the great folks at Blizzard Entertainment did with Overwatch. They added 2 features this year that were crucial. One was the looking for group feature that allows you to really customize your team, basically. Really find the right team that you want to have with the right folks. And the other one is endorsements. And endorsements, it's a great way to recognize great sportsmanship and great team players after a game of Overwatch. So that's another example of focusing on the positive, on the productive, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll say, having run giant studios, very big monetary and human being studios with massive audiences, it's a very tough job to run one of these businesses. you're having to make these trade-offs all the time on resources, both monetary and the people that you have working for you every day. And the reason why I was so excited to talk to you today is I know, having worked with community teams, how hard it is to go in and pitch your project as something that absolutely has to make the roadmap. And I just wanted to come on today and say, this is the way to do it. The way to do it is to get into the metrics and understand what it means to retention. Because if you go into your senior vice president, GM, whoever that decision maker is, and you can show that correlation between, I've talked to the legal team, I've talked to a bunch of other people, and yes, we need to get rid of hate speech. And we know that we have to get rid of PII and various other things that could be passed along in the game. But I think we can improve retention, and I think we can improve monetization at the same time. When you can marry those ideas of, I'm going to take care of these problems, these headaches that you have that seem just kind of latent and always there, and I'm going to help you drive this business. That's when I think you're really going to start to see more traction on how do you pay for this? How do you get it in the budget? How do you get some engineers to go and integrate? And that, to me, I just because I've been doing this for 15 years and I started with Toontown Online and Disney's Daily Blast back in the mid 2000s, I've been doing this forever. I could see this, early on, that this was extremely valuable. It's now exciting to see that there are ways to quantitatively prove that and get it into more teams and more organizations. And frankly, to help community teams that, for, in my opinion, far too long have had to kind of beg for resources.
That's excellent advice. I really appreciate this point of thinking. Yeah, community teams should think a little bit more business wise. Think about the business, think about the growth, right? And bring this side to the conversation.
Yeah, well, really think about the health of your community, because I think that's the most important thing, right? Stay true to who you are and what you are in your mission every day, which is to make sure people are safe, make sure they're having a great experience. But then when you want to go get what you want, put that business hat on. And it's more turning a switch. Now, I'm not trying to convert everybody into being business people. I understand. I made a game, Toontown, about the cogs versus the tunes, right? I don't expect everybody to be a cog and put on their business suit every day. But I do want more people to experience the win of getting things that help them do their jobs better. And so I think this is that magic key that, as when I was running a profit and loss statement, when I had to make the budget every month, there are some magic words that just get those people to pay you a little bit more attention and hear you out a little bit longer.
Awesome. I think that's an excellent segue for us to go into question time. I hope you folks have questions for Steve, because obviously you can already tell, right, that Steve has so much knowledge and experience. It would be great to hear your questions, or even any thoughts that you have about this, how you are doing this in your company right now.
So I did just see, while we're waiting, I did just see I missed Toontown pop up. And I miss Toontown too. That's why I go visit Toontown Rewritten. So if you need your Toontown fix, I will definitely plug the folks at Toontown Rewritten who have kept that game alive. I think we published it in 2004, maybe.
Wow.
And you're looking at a game that's 14 years old and still going strong, and actually was a bit of the forerunner and inspiration for Club Penguin. So, we kind of kicked off a whole kids and family virtual worlds business that it's cool to have been a part of that.
Yeah, it's a legacy, right? A true legacy.
Yeah, the problem with that, Carlos, is you have to be old to have a legacy. So,
Q&A.
We have a question here. All right, so let me take a quick look. All right, so here's the question, Steve. When did you become convinced that Moderator Chat was a critical business process? Was there a turning point for you there?
Absolutely. So, and I'm going to talk about when I became convinced moderated chat was important, and then when I decided that artificial intelligence plus moderation was going to be important. So let's talk about moderation. So you're running Toontown, and it's very early on in the process, and we got a lot of street credibility from the actual original makers of MMOs. So the guys who made EverQuest, the folks at Sony Online Entertainment, and they were showing their families our game. and Smedley was showing his wife the game, and somebody wandered through with a name that was extremely inappropriate on the screen in Toontown because we hadn't implemented our moderation systems yet. And she was like, see there, that's why the mass market will never play these games. It was moments like that where you're like, okay, we need to really wrestle this to ground. I am not and I wasn't a parent at the time. I am not, as a Disney employee, going to put people on, Space Mountain without a seatbelt. I'm surely not going to put them inside of Toontown without looking at the words that are said. Not only that, but we were dealing with a lot of teens, and there were a lot of issues that that when you have a community of parents and kids that need to be addressed, that need to be dealt with. It's not all happiness and light in the world, and so we really wanted to have our finger on the pulse of what was going on in the world, make sure that people were sticking to the context of the game. That we were really holding up Disney values. So that led to, moderation is very important. Then we started turning it into an advantage when we started doing parties, things like that. But then artificial intelligence. So then it would be convenient to say, like, now let's just go put artificial intelligence in. But what led me to that will never be enough was rugging. What's rugging? So we had put a system in Toontown where you couldn't pass. We had these things called secret codes. So if you really wanted to lock down chat, you had to pass the secret code to another person. We made sure that you couldn't input it in the game, so it would have to be in the real world. What we didn't count on was the people in the game figured out that you could buy as many rugs as you wanted, and you could put them in your home on your Toon estate. And then if you went to the God's Eye View camera and you looked down, you could spell out the secret codes. And at that point, I knew the kids are way smarter than we are. The people playing these games are way smarter than we are. And it would take a while for that pattern to develop. We could go in and we could figure out the creativity that was there. For a computer, it needs to learn. It needs a learning path before it's really going to pick up on something new and innovative. And so really to keep on top of that innovation, for me, it was, I'm always going to need some human eyes on this problem. They're going to help the computers find the things that they're going to want to look at. There's some, obviously, the use of the queen mother of swear words that a computer is going to do just fine with. But those new inventive ideas that our communities come up with, those are the ones where I think human involvement will always be necessary.
Absolutely. I was actually having a conversation with an industry friend yesterday, and we were talking about exactly that challenge of those open worlds nowadays where kids are creating all sorts of very amazing things, but they can use the different tools that they have, right, and materials to spell out multiple things, right? They can create shapes that are not appropriate. They can create ways of, in the case you shared, it was a code, but it could also be a phone number. It could be something like that. And that's why I believe in, like you, I believe in the combination there of artificial intelligence, but also really smart moderators who can be empowered to do an amazing job. Have the system take care of a lot of the automation when it comes to text, image filtering, video filtering, and then have a really amazing team of people who can go and do the really nuanced and hard job, because that creative side of kids and teenagers and sometimes adults as well, it doesn't stop, right?
Only takes one hip hop song for Word to change its meaning completely.
Yes. We have more questions too. So let me just take a look here quickly. One question is, how would you present improving community in a game that's live and they say doesn't have a problem, but they do?
Right. So because you don't have a problem doesn't mean you don't have an opportunity. And so I'd go back on the opportunity front and ask the people who make the game, like, do you know, are you positive you know what the triggers are that really help you both get early retention in the game, get people to play the game, and then are going to help you build the game? And start looking at what do the retention curves look like? How can I impact that conversation? What does the monetization curve look like? What percent of our audience are we monetizing? Okay, of the people who have monetized, what conversations are they having and who are they interacting with? All of this, sitting on this data back end are ways to take that exact same data that you say you don't have a problem. Well, first of all, I have 3 teenage boys, and I assume I don't have a problem, probably because I'm not with them 98% of the day. If I knew the 100% of what they're actually doing, I may change my perspective on that. It probably goes the same for if you could see 100% of the conversations in your game. It's convenient to kind of keep it out of your mind. I would say that, but then I would also focus on that more forward-leaning. All right, but then let's talk about what are the positive ways I can help you identify the most positive things in this community that then we can spread. We can figure out gameplay or messaging or any number of ways to spread those messages to people to help improve metrics on those other players that aren't in that cohort of the most engaged, most monetizing users.
Perfect. I really appreciate the angle of opportunity there, looking for opportunity. There's another one too. I think it's the last question we're going to take. This one is, do you think this type of service filtering will be mandated by either the corporation or by legislation?
So I live in Florida, a very contested place in terms of legislation right now, and ground zero for the United States political situation. And I can tell you, we never kind of know what politicians are going to do. I do think there has never been a bad time for a politician to say that they were protecting people, and generally they don't know what they're doing when they say that. So they're kind of clueless. So if you look at how other COPA restrictions and other things have come down in the past, it's always been like, how could you be wrong in saying right now that you want to curb Google, Twitter, etc., and their ability to make things more toxic? Like, that is just a statement that as a politician, if you make it, people are going to give you credit for. So my bet is there will be some sort of a legislative fix to toxicity. Now, do I know that will be mandated filtering? I don't, but I do think they're going to have to do something, because this is such a visceral topic right now in the zeitgeist. On the corporate side, I would be stunned if any corporation didn't already mandate this. Once a lawyer, any general counsel knows that they can know what the conversations are and know what's taking place, for them to then turn away from that would probably not be a positive move in my opinion. Again, I'm not an attorney. I got into law school, never attended. But I just think from a corporate liability point of view, from a corporate, just your persona, your visibility in the world, you don't want the basics not to be covered. And this is table stakes. I mean, this is basics, being able to say, for sure, we know what the conversations are. For sure, we're doing at least the minimum possible to protect our players in our community. I don't know how you would be able to turn away from that.
Absolutely, agreed. So we've reached the end of the questions here, and I just wanted to share a couple of closing thoughts on my end, and then I'll open for you, Steve, to share your closing thoughts as well. And also talk a little bit about what you're doing right now with your business. I would love to hear that too. So from my perspective, I would say, well, first, amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Steve. And I really hope that folks got a lot of value out of this. We'll be also sending the recording to the folks who weren't able to attend and other people who can benefit. And I just want to reiterate that this is a huge focus for me this quarter. So I'm co-producing white papers and resources that will draw that connection between community work and ROI in terms of the growth of a game and a platform. So there's more coming regarding that. And I also want people to know that there will be another webinar in our series before the end of the year. And that webinar is most likely going to happen in early December, right? We don't have the date locked in, but it's a partner who will be joining us. And we will be talking about what ROI and retention means in their world and how they're seeing this space, which is really great. Those pieces will all, they're going to connect. So I'm excited for what's next. Thanks again, Steve, and I would love to hear your closing thoughts, please.
My closing thought is my career has been about solving really hard problems through creativity. You know, I had to solve a problem of why would you build a Disney cruise ship if you don't have gambling and you can't drink on as much as you normally would if you're around your kids on a cruise, and I helped figure that out. I help figure out why would you put in a fast pass system, because now you're just going to have more employees having to attend to these people wandering all over. And I help figure out that problem. We help figure out at Zynga, how can we make creativity and community more front of the queue in terms of our roadmap. And I love this conversation for helping people figure out how can they take toxicity, get rid of that, obviously, but turn it into a more proactive conversation on, all right, but what's the positive we can do in the world? Now, how can we go help drive even more benefit using the exact same tools? I mean, this is something we're already invested in. How do we make it even bigger than what we already have? And you asked about my business. That's what I'm doing now in my business. I'm just Steve at joyfulmagic.com. I am a consultant, and I help people figure out really hard problems and how to go get them done. And I enjoy doing that every day, and that's why I was excited to have this conversation. So if anyone has any questions or needs help justifying solving problems like this, I'm here for that.
Absolutely. I think it has become probably very obvious to everybody your passion for tackling problems and finding opportunity, like you said, finding a way forward, and your full willingness to help, which brings to the point of thank you so much for joining us, for adding so much value to our webinar series. And I look forward to our future collaborations as well.
Thank you, Carlos. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.